The Galactic Defense Council had seen many species join their ranks over the centuries. The Zephyrians, with their crystal-clear vision, could spot enemies from impossible distances. The Krathos possessed steady hands that never trembled, even under the most intense pressure. The Villani could calculate wind patterns and atmospheric conditions in their heads faster than most computers. Each species brought their unique gifts to the Sniper Corps, making it the most elite unit in the galaxy. Then came the humans. Commander Vex 9 of the Andromedian High Command stood before the newest recruit, his four eyes scanning the personnel file with growing confusion. The human female before him appeared remarkably ordinary by galactic standards. No enhanced vision organs, no additional limbs for stability, no natural computational abilities that registered on their scanners. She stood barely 5.5 feet tall with brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and dark eyes that seemed to hold secrets. Sarah Chen, Vex 9 read from the holographic display. Age 26 from the planet Earth. Previous military experience includes conventional ground forces. His mandibles clicked, and what other species had learned was the Andromedian equivalent of a skeptical laugh. Miss Chen, are you certain you understand what unit you've volunteered for? Sarah nodded once, her expression calm and focused. Yes, sir. The 47th Galactic Sniper Division. I'm here to serve. The other recruits in the training facility had stopped their exercises to observe this unusual situation. A Zephyrian named Crixtel whispered to his partner, "The human doesn't even have targeting implants. How does she expect to compete with species that have evolved for precision shooting?" Sergeant Major Thorne, a grizzled Krathos veteran with arms thick as tree trunks, approached the group. His species was known for their absolute physical control and had dominated sniper training records for the past 50 years. Commander, perhaps the human would be better suited for support roles? Communications, supply logistics, medical assistance? Sarah's jaw tightened slightly, but she remained silent. She had heard similar suggestions throughout her journey to this training facility. Every species she encountered seemed convinced that humans were too limited, too fragile, too ordinary to compete at this level. Very well, Commander Vex 9 decided. We shall proceed with standard evaluation protocols. However, I want it clearly understood that the 47th Division maintains the highest standards in the galaxy. We cannot afford to lower our requirements simply to accommodate new species. The training facility sprawled across several square miles of diverse terrain. Mountains, forests, urban environments, and even zero-gravity chambers provided every possible scenario a sniper might encounter. The initial assessment would take place on the standard 1,000-meter range, where targets moved in complex patterns while environmental conditions constantly shifted. Crixtel stepped up to the firing line first. His crystalline eyes dilated and contracted as he analyzed the target patterns. Wind sensors in his nasal cavities calculated atmospheric conditions with mathematical precision. His first shot rang out, striking the center target perfectly. The second and third shots followed with mechanical accuracy. Perfect score. The Krathos recruit Gormhai took his position next. His massive frame remained absolutely motionless as he lined up his shots. His species' natural ability to control their heartbeat and breathing gave him an almost supernatural steadiness. 3 more perfect hits. One by one, each alien recruit demonstrated the superior abilities their species were known for. Enhanced senses, computational minds, and specialized physiology all combined to produce scores that would have been impossible for baseline humans just a few generations ago. Then came Sarah's turn. She approached the firing line without ceremony, carrying a rifle that looked ancient compared to the advanced energy weapons the others used. It was a kinetic projectile weapon, something most species had abandoned centuries ago in favor of plasma and particle beam technology. The other recruits exchanged glances that clearly communicated their thoughts. The human was not only physically inferior, but technologically backward as well. Sarah settled into a prone position, her movements economical and practiced. She didn't have any of the elaborate sensor equipment the others used. No atmospheric analyzers, no wind detection systems, no computerized targeting assistance. Just her eyes, her instincts, and whatever strange human intuition had brought her this far. Commander Vex 9 observed through his tactical scope, curious despite himself. He had studied human military history during their recent admission to the Galactic Council. Their species had a reputation for unpredictability and stubborn determination, but nothing in their records suggested they could compete with naturally gifted sniper species. The Rangemaster activated the target sequence. 3 targets began moving in complex patterns, their paths deliberately unpredictable to prevent pre-calculation of trajectories. Environmental conditions shifted as atmospheric processors created wind patterns that would challenge even the most advanced targeting systems. Sarah breathed slowly, her finger resting lightly on the trigger. The first target moved behind a barrier, emerged for 2 seconds, then disappeared again. Most snipers would wait for a longer window, but Sarah's rifle barked once. The target's center mass lit up, indicating a perfect hit. Murmurs rippled through the observation area. Lucky shot, most assumed. The second target moved erratically, using an algorithm designed to simulate combat evasion patterns. Sarah tracked it smoothly, her movements flowing like water. Another shot, another perfect hit. By the time her third shot found its mark with the same impossible precision, the training facility had fallen completely silent. Impossible, Crixtel whispered. She has no enhancement technology. No computational assistance. How did she calculate those trajectories? Sergeant Major Thorne's expression had shifted from skeptical dismissal to intense interest. In his 40 years of military service, he had never seen anyone shoot with such natural precision using primitive equipment. Commander Vex 9 found himself leaning forward, his 4 eyes focused intently on the human. Her performance defied every expectation he had formed, based on her species' apparent limitations. There was something here that their sensors and analysis had completely missed. Perhaps, he said slowly, we should move to the advanced range. Sarah stood and shouldered her rifle, completely unaware that she had just shattered several assumptions about human capabilities. To her, the shots had felt natural, almost effortless. She had been shooting since childhood, but she had never considered it anything special. It was simply something she enjoyed, something that brought her a sense of peace and focus that she had never found elsewhere. As the group moved toward the more challenging course, none of them realized they were witnessing the first glimpse of something that would soon redefine their understanding of what it meant to be human. The advanced training range resembled a nightmare maze of obstacles, moving platforms, and environmental hazards. Targets appeared at distances ranging from 500 to 3,000 meters, often visible for mere seconds before disappearing behind cover. Weather generators created rain, snow, sandstorms, and electromagnetic interference that would disrupt most targeting systems. Commander Vex 9 had designed this course personally after studying the most challenging sniper scenarios from across the galaxy. Only 15% of candidates from the most naturally gifted species managed to pass on their first attempt. Most required weeks of additional training and multiple retests. The scenario simulates a hostage rescue operation on Kepler 442b, he explained to the group of recruits. Terrorist forces have occupied a civilian facility. Your targets are enemy combatants holding innocent lives at stake. Collateral damage means automatic failure. Environmental conditions include electromagnetic storms that will interfere with most electronic targeting systems. Crixtel stepped forward first, confidence radiating from his crystalline features. His species had dominated this particular exercise for the past decade. The Zephyrian's enhanced eyes began their analysis routine, calculating distances and atmospheric conditions with mechanical precision. The first target appeared at 2,200 meters, partially concealed behind what appeared to be a civilian hostage. Crixtel's targeting computer hummed quietly as it processed the shot parameters. His weapon's energy discharge lit up the range, but the shot went wide by several centimeters. The electromagnetic interference had disrupted his targeting system at the crucial moment. Target missed, announced the range computer in its emotionless voice. Civilian casualty registered. Exercise terminated. Crixtel's mandibles clicked in frustration as he stepped back from the firing line. The other alien recruits shifted nervously. If a Zephyrian couldn't handle the electromagnetic interference, what hope did the rest of them have? Gormhai attempted the course next. The massive Krathos relied less on electronic assistance, depending instead on his species' natural stability and computational abilities. He managed to hit 2 targets before the combination of distance and weather conditions forced an error that would have wounded a civilian. Exercise terminated. One by one, each recruit attempted the course. Each one failed, defeated by the brutal combination of technical challenges and environmental conditions that the course had been specifically designed to create. By the time the last alien recruit had stepped away from the firing line in defeat, a heavy atmosphere of disappointment hung over the entire facility. "Perhaps we should postpone this particular exercise," suggested Sergeant Major Thorne. "The electromagnetic interference levels are higher than usual today. Even experienced snipers might struggle under these conditions." Commander Vex 9 nodded thoughtfully, but his attention remained fixed on the human recruit who had remained silent throughout the other attempts. Sarah Chen stood calmly at the back of the group, showing no signs of nervousness or concern despite having witnessed every other candidate fail spectacularly. "Miss Chen," he called out, "would you like to attempt the course, or would you prefer to wait for more favorable conditions?" Sarah walked forward without hesitation. "I'd like to try now, sir." The other recruits watched with a mixture of curiosity and sympathy. The human had performed surprisingly well on the basic range, but this course was in an entirely different category of difficulty. Even with her apparent natural ability, she was still using primitive kinetic weapons against targets that had been designed to challenge the most advanced technology in the galaxy. Sarah settled into position and began studying the course layout through her rifle's simple optical scope. Unlike the others, she spent several minutes in observation before indicating her readiness to begin. The other recruits had relied on their technological advantages to analyze conditions in seconds, but Sarah seemed to be using an entirely different approach. "Beginning exercise," announced the range computer. The first target materialized at extreme range, barely visible even through advanced optics. A figure in combat armor stood behind 3 civilians, with only a small portion of his helmet visible above their heads. The electromagnetic storm crackling overhead would have made electronic targeting nearly impossible. Sarah's breathing slowed to an almost meditative rhythm. She seemed to be listening to something the others couldn't hear, feeling environmental conditions that their sensors couldn't detect. Her finger found the trigger, and the weapon fired with a sharp crack that cut through the artificial storm. The target's helmet exploded in a shower of synthetic fragments. "Perfect hit. Impossible," breathed Crixtel. The electromagnetic interference should have made that shot unachievable without computational assistance. The second target appeared at medium range, moving quickly between cover positions while dragging a hostage. Sarah tracked the movement with fluid grace, seeming to anticipate where the target would appear before it actually did. Her second shot found its mark with the same devastating precision. By the fourth target, the observation deck had filled with instructors and senior staff, who had heard rumors of something extraordinary happening on the advanced range. Word was spreading through the facility that the human recruit was accomplishing something that defied all conventional understanding of sniper capabilities. Commander Vex 9 found himself holding his breath as Sarah lined up her final shot. The target was at maximum range over 3,000 meters away, partially concealed by atmospheric distortion and moving erratically to avoid detection. Electronic targeting systems would be useless at this distance under these conditions. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, as if centering herself on something beyond the physical world. When she opened them again, there was a quality of absolute certainty in her expression that sent chills through the observing aliens. The shot echoed across the range like thunder. 3 seconds later, the distant target exploded in a shower of training debris. The range fell completely silent except for the simulated storm crackling overhead. The exercise computer's voice seemed almost confused as it announced, "Course completed. Perfect score achieved. All hostiles eliminated with 0 civilian casualties." Sergeant Major Thorne's jaw hung open in disbelief. "In 40 years of service, I have never seen anyone complete that course on their first attempt. Even seasoned veterans require multiple tries to achieve a passing score." The other recruits stared at Sarah with expressions ranging from awe to complete bewilderment. Everything they understood about sniper capabilities had just been turned upside down by a human, using equipment that most species considered obsolete. Commander Vex 9 approached Sarah as she cleared her weapon and secured it in carrying position. "Miss Chen, that was remarkable. Could you explain how you managed to achieve such precision without electronic targeting assistance?" Sarah looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "I just shot where they were going to be, sir. It felt natural." "Felt natural?" Vex 9's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "You calculated trajectories for shots over 3 kilometers in electromagnetic storm conditions, and it felt natural?" "I suppose so," Sarah replied with a slight shrug. "I've been shooting since I was 8 years old. My grandfather taught me to hunt in the mountains back home. He always said that all the fancy equipment in the world couldn't replace understanding your weapon and trusting your instincts. The simplicity of her explanation only deepened the mystery surrounding her performance. As the group prepared to move on to the next phase of training, none of them realized that they had just witnessed something that would fundamentally change the galactic military's understanding of human potential. News of Sarah's performance spread through the Galactic Defense Council like wildfire. Within hours, high-ranking officials from multiple species were requesting detailed reports on the human recruit who had somehow outperformed candidates with natural evolutionary advantages and advanced technology. Admiral Keth 9 of the Andromedian Fleet Command arrived at the training facility the next morning, accompanied by a team of military analysts and xenobiologists. The Admiral's reputation preceded him as one of the most decorated tactical minds in the galaxy, someone who had never accepted anything at face value without thorough investigation. Commander Vex 9, the Admiral said as they observed the morning training session from the command center. I've reviewed the performance recordings from yesterday. Are you absolutely certain there was no equipment malfunction? No data corruption in the targeting systems? We've run diagnostics 3 times, sir, Vex 9 replied. All systems functioned perfectly. The human achieved those results using nothing but kinetic projectile weapons and optical targeting. Admiral Keth 9's expression grew even more skeptical. His species had spent millennia developing the mathematical and technological foundations for precision shooting. The idea that a primitive biological system could outperform their carefully engineered solutions challenged everything he understood about ballistics and targeting theory. I want to observe her performance personally, he decided. Set up the impossible shot scenario. Commander Vex 9's mandibles clicked nervously. Sir, the impossible shot was designed as a theoretical exercise. We've never actually expected anyone to attempt it, let alone succeed. Then today we'll discover whether yesterday's performance was skill or extraordinary luck. The impossible shot scenario had been created by a committee of the galaxy's top ballistics experts as the ultimate test of sniper capability. The target sat at 4,500 meters, behind multiple layers of atmospheric distortion, electromagnetic interference, and physical obstacles. Computer models suggested that even perfect technology operated by perfect beings would have only a 12% chance of success. Sarah arrived for the morning session unaware of the attention her previous performance had generated. She noticed the increased number of observers in the command center, but assumed it was normal for this phase of training. The other recruits had been treating her differently since yesterday, with a mixture of respect and nervousness that she found puzzling. Miss Chen, Admiral Keth 9 addressed her directly as she prepared her equipment. I understand you've shown considerable promise in your initial evaluations. Today we have a special challenge that will test the absolute limits of your abilities. Sarah nodded politely. Yes, sir. I'm ready to try whatever you think is appropriate. The Admiral studied her carefully, looking for any sign of enhanced genetics or hidden augmentation that their scanners might have missed. He found nothing but a young, human woman who seemed remarkably calm considering the situation she was about to face. The target today sits at a distance that most species consider beyond the maximum effective range of kinetic weapons, he explained. Environmental conditions include Class 4 electromagnetic storms, thermal distortion from multiple heat sources, and physical obstacles that will require trajectory calculations of unprecedented complexity. Crixtel and the other alien recruits exchanged meaningful glances. They had heard whispers about the impossible shot from senior students. It was considered more of a mathematical thought experiment than an actual training exercise. Sarah was led to a specialized firing position that offered the best possible angle to the distant target. Through her scope, she could barely make out the target marker, a small red indicator nearly 5 kilometers away across a landscape that seemed designed to make accurate shooting impossible. Take as much time as you need to study the conditions, suggested Commander Vex 9. Most candidates require several hours of preparation for attempts at this range. Sarah settled into position and began her observation. Unlike the methodical technical analysis the alien recruits had used, her approach seemed almost meditative. She watched the environmental conditions not as separate variables to be calculated, but as parts of a complex system that she needed to understand intuitively. The wind patterns shifted constantly, creating air currents that would deflect projectiles in unpredictable ways. Thermal distortion from industrial heat sources created visual mirages that made accurate range estimation nearly impossible. The electromagnetic storm overhead crackled with energy that interfered with any electronic systems within a kilometer radius. For 30 minutes, Sarah simply observed and breathed. The observers in the command center grew restless, checking chronometers and whispering among themselves. This was taking much longer than her previous performances, and many began to suspect that she had finally encountered a challenge beyond her mysterious abilities. Then something changed. Admiral Keth 9, watching through high-powered observation equipment, noticed that Sarah's breathing had shifted into an almost hypnotic rhythm. Her movements became minimal, conserving energy for the moment when everything would need to come together perfectly. Most remarkably, she seemed to have stopped trying to analyze the environmental conditions and instead was simply experiencing them. Fascinating, murmured Dr. Yiltep, the expedition's chief xenobiologist. Her neural patterns are showing extraordinary integration between conscious analysis and subconscious processing. It's as if her entire nervous system has become a biological targeting computer. Sarah closed her eyes for a long moment, then opened them with an expression of absolute certainty. Her finger found the trigger and she began the slow, steady pressure that would release the shot. In the command center, every conversation stopped. Dozens of eyes and optical sensors focused on the distant target, while others watched Sarah's form through magnification systems that could detect the smallest tremor or movement. The rifle fired with its familiar sharp crack. For what seemed like an eternity, nothing happened. The projectile was traveling nearly 5 kilometers through some of the most challenging atmospheric conditions that could be artificially created. Computer calculations suggested a flight time of over 6 seconds under these conditions. Then, the distant target exploded in a shower of synthetic debris that was visible even at extreme range. The command center erupted in chaos. Admiral Keth 9 stood frozen in disbelief, while junior officers scrambled to confirm what their instruments were telling them. Computer analysis confirmed what everyone had witnessed. A perfect center mass hit at a distance that defied every accepted principle of ballistic science. "This is unprecedented," Admiral Keth 9 said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Miss Chen, you have just accomplished something that our best computer models deemed virtually impossible." Sarah looked genuinely surprised by the reaction her shot had generated. "Was it really that difficult, sir?" "I mean, it felt challenging, but not impossible." Dr. Yiltep approached with scanning equipment, eager to understand what made this human different from others of her species. "Miss Chen, would you consent to detailed physiological analysis? We're trying to understand how you achieved this level of performance." "Of course," Sarah agreed readily, "though I'm not sure what you'll find. I'm just a regular person from Earth who likes to shoot." As the scientific team began their analysis, none of them could have predicted what they were about to discover about human potential. The real mystery was just beginning to unfold, and its implications would reach far beyond a single training exercise on a military base. Dr. Yiltep's laboratory aboard the orbital research station buzzed with activity as teams of scientists from across the galaxy worked to unravel the mystery of Sarah Chen's extraordinary abilities. For 3 days, they had subjected her to every test their combined medical knowledge could devise, yet the results only deepened the puzzle. "Her physical parameters are completely within normal human ranges," Dr. Yiltep reported to the assembled committee of military and scientific leaders. Muscle density, reaction time, visual acuity, neural processing speed, everything registers as typical for her species. Yet somehow she consistently outperforms individuals with measurably superior physical capabilities. Admiral Keth 9 studied the holographic displays showing Sarah's brain activity during shooting exercises. The patterns were unlike anything in their extensive databases of sniper candidates from dozens of species. "What about genetic enhancement? Hidden augmentation? Some form of technology we haven't detected?" "We've searched for everything," replied Dr. Vexhar, the expedition's technology specialist. "Nano-enhancement, genetic modification, cybernetic implants, quantum computational interfaces. Nothing. She appears to be completely unmodified baseline human." The committee fell into frustrated silence. Everything they understood about ballistics, targeting, and precision shooting suggested that Sarah's performance should be impossible. Yet the evidence was undeniable, recorded by multiple independent systems and witnessed by dozens of qualified observers. Perhaps, suggested Professor Krimtel of the Zephyrian Science Academy, we're approaching this from the wrong angle. Instead of looking for what makes her superior, maybe we should examine what we're missing about human capabilities in general. This comment sparked an intense debate among the assembled experts. For centuries, humans had been classified as one of the less specialized species in the galactic community. They lacked the enhanced senses, specialized physiology, or computational abilities that characterized most successful military species. They were considered adaptable generalists, useful for their creativity and determination, but not particularly outstanding in any specific area. Meanwhile, Sarah continued her training regimen, unaware of the scientific furor she had generated. The other recruits had begun treating her with a mixture of awe and uncertainty that made normal social interaction difficult. She found herself eating alone and spending her free time in the observation lounges, staring out at the stars and wondering if she had made a mistake in leaving Earth. It was during one of these solitary moments that Sergeant Major Thorne found her. The massive Kratho settled into a chair that creaked under his weight and followed her gaze toward the swirling nebula visible through the station's main viewport. "Feeling isolated?" he asked in his deep, gravelly voice. Sarah nodded without taking her eyes off the stars. "Everyone looks at me like I'm some kind of alien now. Which is ironic, considering I'm the only actual human here." Thorne's laugh rumbled like distant thunder. "In my 40 years of service, I've learned that exceptional ability often comes with unexpected costs. Your fellow recruits aren't sure how to relate to someone who can do things they can't understand." "But that's just it," Sarah said, finally turning to face him. "I don't understand it either. When I'm shooting, it doesn't feel like I'm doing anything extraordinary. It just feels right. Like everything is connected and all I have to do is be part of that connection." The Krathos studied her with intelligent eyes that had seen countless combat situations across the galaxy. "Tell me about your training on Earth. Who taught you to shoot?" Sarah's expression softened as memories surfaced. "My grandfather, mostly. He was a hunter and a veteran of the Earth Defense Forces. We used to spend summers in the mountains tracking deer and elk through terrain that would challenge most people just to walk through." "What did he teach you about shooting?" "That it wasn't really about the shooting at all," Sarah replied. "He said the rifle was just a tool, like a hammer or a screwdriver. The real skill was in understanding the whole situation, the wind, the temperature, the way light moved through the air, how the animal was thinking and where it would go next." He called it reading the forest. Thorne leaned forward with growing interest. "Reading the forest?" He said everything in nature is connected. The wind that moves the grass also affects the flight of your bullet. The temperature that makes you shiver also changes how your rifle behaves. The instincts that tell a deer when to run are the same ones that can tell you when to shoot. You don't fight against these forces. You become part of them. For the first time since the mystery began, Thorne felt like he was starting to understand something important. "So when you shoot, you're not calculating trajectory and wind compensation mathematically?" "Not really," Sarah admitted. "I mean, I understand the physics involved, but when I'm actually shooting, it's more like listening. The environment tells me what needs to happen, and I just have to be still enough to hear it." Their conversation was interrupted by an emergency alert echoing through the station. All personnel were ordered to report to battle stations, as an unidentified vessel had been detected approaching the system. Within minutes, the training facility had transformed into a bustling command center as senior officers coordinated the response to what could be a potential threat. Admiral Keth Nine's voice crackled over the communication system. Long-range sensors indicate a disabled cargo vessel of unknown configuration. "They're broadcasting a distress signal, but we can't establish communication due to severe electromagnetic interference from the local star." Commander Vex 9 approached Thorne and Sarah as they made their way to the assembly area. "Sergeant Major, we need to deploy a reconnaissance team to investigate the vessel. Given the interference levels, most of our targeting systems will be compromised if the situation turns hostile." Thorne nodded grimly. "Understood, sir. What kind of range are we talking about?" "Initial contact will be at approximately 8,000 meters. The electromagnetic storm in that region is severe enough to disable most electronic targeting systems." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the implications. If this turned into a combat situation, they would need snipers capable of operating at extreme range without technological assistance. In the entire facility, there was only one person who had demonstrated that capability. "Sir," she said quietly, "I volunteer for the reconnaissance mission." Admiral Keth 9, who had been monitoring the conversation, stepped forward. "Miss Chen, this could potentially become a live combat situation. Are you prepared for that responsibility?" Sarah thought about her grandfather's teachings, about the connection between all things that he had spent years helping her understand. She thought about the trust that these people were placing in her abilities, and the possibility that lives might depend on her performance. "Yes, sir," she said with quiet confidence. "I'm ready." The reconnaissance shuttle cut through space toward the mysterious vessel, its hull scarred by electromagnetic discharges from the violent solar storm raging throughout the system. Sarah sat in the sniper's position, her rifle secured and her mind focused on the mission ahead. Through the viewport, she could see their destination growing larger, a sleek ship of unfamiliar design that showed signs of significant damage. "Electromagnetic interference is intensifying," reported Lieutenant Zek 4, the shuttle's pilot. "All electronic targeting systems are offline. We're flying on manual navigation and basic instruments only." Commander Vex 9, leading the 6-person team, checked his equipment one final time. "Remember, we don't know who built that ship or why they're here. Our job is to assess the situation and provide assistance if appropriate, but everyone stays alert. If this turns hostile, Miss Chen, you'll be our primary defensive asset." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. This wasn't a training exercise with predetermined targets and known ranges. This was a real situation where unknown variables could mean the difference between life and death for her team. As they approached the disabled vessel, details became clearer through the interference. The ship was approximately 200 meters long, built with angular, aggressive lines that suggested military purpose rather than civilian cargo transport. Weapon ports were visible along its hull, though they appeared to be powered down. "I'm detecting life signs," announced Dr. Keth Tell, the team's medical officer. "At least 30 individuals aboard, but their biosignatures don't match any species in our database." "Unknown species?" Vex 9's mandibles clicked with concern. "That makes this a first contact situation. All protocols remain in effect, but everyone exercises maximum caution." The shuttle settled into a position 3 kilometers from the damaged vessel, close enough to provide assistance but far enough away to retreat if necessary. As they established their observation post, Sarah began studying the unknown ship through her rifle scope, looking for any signs of hostile intent or hidden weapon systems. "The damage appears consistent with electromagnetic storm exposure," she reported. "I can see several hull breaches that look recent, and their external lighting is flickering inconsistently. It looks like they really are in distress." Commander Vex 9 activated the shuttle's communication array, broadcasting on standard emergency frequencies. "Unknown vessel. This is Commander Vex 9 of the Galactic Defense Council. We have received your distress signal and are prepared to offer assistance. Please respond." For several minutes, only static answered their calls. Then gradually a voice emerged through the interference, speaking in a language none of them recognized, but with tones that clearly indicated urgency and desperation. Dr. Keth Tell worked frantically with the translation computer, trying to establish basic communication. "I'm getting fragments, sir. Something about systems failing, life support compromised, and what might be a request for help." As they worked to establish communication, Sarah continued her surveillance of the vessel. Her grandfather had taught her that understanding a situation meant observing everything, not just the obvious details. She noticed movement within the ship, figures passing by illuminated windows, seeming to move with purpose rather than panic. Then she saw something that made her blood run cold. "Commander," she said urgently, "I'm seeing what looks like weapon emplacements deploying from concealed positions. This might not be a genuine distress call." Vex 9 immediately moved to the observation equipment, but the electromagnetic interference was too severe for their electronic sensors to penetrate. "Are you certain? What exactly are you seeing?" Sarah adjusted her scope and studied the distant vessel more carefully. There are panels opening along the ship's dorsal surface. The equipment emerging has the characteristic shape of energy weapons, probably plasma cannons based on the barrel configuration. They're trying to conceal the deployment, but the movement is definitely deliberate. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. If Sarah was correct, they were facing an ambush rather than a rescue situation. The unknown species had deliberately disabled their own ship to lure Galactic Defense Council forces into close range, where superior firepower could compensate for technological disadvantages. "Can you engage those weapon systems from this range?" Vex 9 asked, his tactical mind already calculating their options. Sarah studied the distance and environmental conditions. 8 kilometers through an electromagnetic storm that was disrupting all their technology. Even for her, it would be an extremely challenging shot, complicated by the fact that she would need to disable specific systems rather than simply destroying targets. "It's possible," she said finally, "but I'll need to understand their technology better. These aren't standard galactic weapons, so I can't predict exactly how they'll react to kinetic impact." Dr. Kethtel, still working with the translation system, suddenly looked up with alarm. "Commander, I'm picking up additional transmissions. It sounds like they're communicating with other vessels. This might be coordinated." As if summoned by his words, proximity alarms began wailing throughout the shuttle. Lieutenant Zekfor's voice carried clear panic. "Sir, we have multiple contacts approaching fast. At least 6 vessels, unknown configuration, closing on our position from different vectors." Through her scope, Sarah could see the truth of their situation unfolding. The damaged vessel had been bait, designed to draw them into a carefully planned trap. The approaching ships were moving in a coordinated pattern that spoke of military training and tactical expertise. "This is a first contact scenario unlike anything in our protocols," Vex 9 said grimly. "We're facing an unknown species with apparent hostile intent, using tactics we haven't encountered before." Sarah felt her breathing slow into the meditative rhythm her grandfather had taught her. Everything around her seemed to crystallize into perfect clarity. The movement of the approaching ships, the weapon systems deploying on the damaged vessel, the electromagnetic storm that was both hindering and protecting them. "Commander," she said quietly, "I can disable their primary weapon systems before the other ships arrive. But once I start shooting, they'll know exactly where we are." Vex 9 looked at his team, 6 individuals against what appeared to be over 200 hostiles, with no possibility of reinforcement through the electromagnetic storm. Their only advantage was one human sniper with abilities that defied explanation. "Miss Chen," he said formally, "you have authorization to engage. Protect the team." Sarah settled into her shooting position, feeling the familiar calm descend over her like a blanket. The chaos around her, the approaching enemy ships, the urgent voices of her teammates, the crackling electromagnetic storm, all faded into background noise as she entered the focused state her grandfather had called becoming one with the shot. Through her scope, she could see the weapon systems on the damaged vessel continuing their deployment sequence. The plasma cannons were nearly operational, their targeting sensors beginning to sweep in their direction. She had perhaps 30 seconds before they would be able to lock onto the shuttle's position. Her first shot rang out across the void, the kinetic projectile crossing 8 kilometers of storm-racked space in just over 7 seconds. The lead plasma cannon exploded in a shower of sparks and debris, its targeting array completely destroyed. The second weapon system was adjusting its position, trying to compensate for the loss of its companion. Sarah tracked its movement smoothly, leading the target by instinct rather than calculation. Her second shot found its mark with the same devastating precision, turning sophisticated alien technology into useless scrap. "Incredible," breathed Dr. Kethtel. "She's engaging targets at impossible range through electromagnetic interference that's blinding our instruments," but Sarah was already moving to her next target. The approaching ships had detected the shuttle's position and were beginning evasive maneuvers while closing the distance. She could see their weapon systems charging, preparing to overwhelm their small craft with concentrated fire. Her third shot struck the lead approaching vessel, punching through what appeared to be their primary sensor array. The ship immediately veered off course, its navigation apparently compromised. The fourth shot disabled the weapons array of another vessel, evening the odds slightly. "They're trying to jam our communications," Lieutenant Zekfor reported, "but whatever they're using isn't affecting Miss Chen's targeting." Sarah smiled grimly as she lined up her 5th shot. Her grandfather had been right. All the technology in the galaxy couldn't replace understanding the fundamental connections between shooter, weapon, and target. While the aliens relied on electronic systems that could be disrupted, she was operating on principles that had existed long before computers were invented. The battle continued for another 10 minutes, with Sarah systematically dismantling the alien ambush one precise shot at a time. By the time the electromagnetic storm began to subside, 3 enemy vessels had been disabled and the others were retreating at maximum speed. Status report. Commander Vex 9 called out as their instruments began functioning normally again. All threats neutralized or withdrawn, Sarah reported, finally lifting her eye from the scope. 6 months after the first contact incident, the Galactic Defense Council's annual strategy conference convened on the neutral world of Kepler Prime. Representatives from 47 species gathered to discuss military doctrine, technological advancement, and the surprising revelations that had emerged from studying human sniper capabilities. Admiral Keth 9 stood before the assembled delegates, his presentation displaying tactical data that had revolutionized their understanding of precision warfare. "The evidence is undeniable," he announced to the crowded amphitheater. "Human soldiers operating with primitive kinetic weapons have consistently outperformed our most advanced targeting systems under adverse conditions." The data spoke for itself. In the months following Sarah's initial training, the Galactic Defense Council had quietly recruited additional human snipers from Earth. Each one had demonstrated abilities that defied conventional military science. They operated effectively in electromagnetic storms that disabled alien technology. They made accurate shots at ranges previously considered impossible. Most remarkably, their performance actually improved under combat stress rather than deteriorating. "But how is this possible?" demanded General Crix Vor of the Zephyrian Defense Force. "Our species evolved specifically for precision targeting. Our technology has been refined over millennia. How can an unenhanced human with primitive equipment outperform our best soldiers?" Dr. Yiltep, now leading a joint research initiative studying human capabilities, activated his holographic display. "After extensive research, we believe we've identified the key factors. Humans possess what we've termed intuitive ballistics, the ability to process environmental variables subconsciously while maintaining conscious focus on the target. The presentation showed brain scans comparing human and alien neural activity during shooting exercises. While alien minds showed intense conscious calculation in specific brain regions, human brains demonstrated distributed processing that integrated sensory input, muscle memory, and predictive analysis in ways that no artificial system had been able to replicate. Furthermore, Dr. Yiltep continued, humans appear to have evolved in an environment that required complex three-dimensional tracking and projectile accuracy for survival. Their hunting heritage has given them cognitive abilities that we've overlooked because they don't match our technological approach to the same problems." In the audience, Sarah Chen sat quietly in her new uniform, bearing the insignia of Master Sergeant Galactic Sniper Division. The promotion had come after she'd successfully trained 3 classes of alien snipers in what the military now called intuitive targeting techniques. Still felt strange to be teaching species that had been studying ballistics for thousands of years before humans even invented gunpowder. Beside her sat her grandfather, Thomas Chen, who had been invited to address the conference about traditional earth hunting techniques. At 78 years old, he seemed remarkably calm considering he was surrounded by representatives of alien civilizations from across the galaxy. "Mr. Chen," Admiral Keth 9 addressed him directly, "could you explain how Earth hunters developed these abilities without technological assistance?" Thomas stood slowly, his weathered hand steady despite his age. "Well, Admiral, I reckon it's pretty simple when you get down to it. We learned to hunt because we had to eat. And if you wanted to eat regular, you had to understand everything about the animal you were tracking and the land you were hunting in." He gestured toward the holographic displays showing complex ballistic calculations. "All these fancy numbers and computers are trying to do what a good hunter does naturally. Read the wind, understand the light, predict where the target's going to be. But machines can only calculate what they're programmed to calculate. A hunter learns to feel things that can't be measured." "Could you elaborate on what you mean by feel things that can't be measured?" asked Professor Vec 9 of the Andromedian Science Institute. Thomas smiled, the expression transforming his gruff features. Well, Professor, take the shot my granddaughter made during that first contact incident. The computers said it was impossible because they were trying to calculate every variable separately. But Sarah didn't calculate anything. She felt how the storm was moving, understood how scared and angry those alien pilots were, and knew exactly where they needed to be stopped. You're suggesting that emotional intelligence plays a role in targeting accuracy? Dr. Yiltep asked with fascination. I'm saying everything's connected, Thomas replied. The wind that's pushing your bullet is the same wind that's making your target nervous. The temperature that's affecting your rifle is the same temperature that's making the other guy cold and shaky. A good hunter doesn't fight against these connections. They become part of them. Sarah watched the assembly of alien military leaders struggle to understand concepts that seemed perfectly natural to her. For months, they had subjected her to endless tests and analysis. Trying to quantify abilities that her grandfather had taught her were simply part of being human. The conference continued for 3 days, with presentations on new training methods, equipment modifications, and tactical doctrines based on human approaches to precision shooting. By the end, it was clear that the entire galactic military structure was being revolutionized by lessons learned from a species they had initially considered technologically primitive. On the final evening, Sarah found herself alone with her grandfather on the observation deck of their accommodation facility, watching Kepler Prime's twin moons rise over the alien landscape. Are you proud of what you've accomplished here? Thomas asked, his voice carrying the gentle tone she remembered from childhood hunting trips. Sarah considered the question carefully. I'm proud that I've been able to help people, and I'm grateful for the opportunities I've been given. But sometimes I wonder if we're making this more complicated than it needs to be. How so? All these scientists and generals are trying to understand how humans can shoot better than species with superior technology. But they're missing the point. It's not about being better. It's about being different. We approach problems in ways they never considered because we learned to survive in a world that required different solutions. Thomas nodded approvingly. Your grandmother would have said the same thing. She always believed that diversity made everything stronger. Ecosystems, communities, even military forces. The funny thing is, Sarah continued, they keep calling our methods primitive. But what's primitive about understanding your environment well enough to work with it instead of trying to dominate it? What's primitive about developing intuition that can process information faster than computers? Nothing primitive about it at all, Thomas agreed. Different doesn't mean lesser. Sometimes it takes outsiders to show people possibilities they never knew existed. As they watched the alien constellations wheel overhead, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her from a small mountain town on Earth to the center of galactic military strategy. She had never set out to revolutionize anything. She had simply applied the lessons her grandfather had taught her to the situations she encountered. The irony wasn't lost on her that, in a galaxy full of species with enhanced senses, computational minds, and advanced technology, it had taken a baseline human with a love of hunting to demonstrate that the most sophisticated targeting system in the universe was the connection between a skilled shooter and their understanding of the world around them. In the months and years that followed, human snipers would become the backbone of the Galactic Defense Council's precision warfare capabilities. Training programs based on Earth hunting traditions would be established on dozens of worlds, and the phrase "reading the forest" would become military terminology throughout the galaxy. But for Sarah Chen, the most important lesson had already been learned, that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from trying to be better than everyone else, but from being authentically yourself in a universe that desperately needs what only you can offer. The sniper unit that had once declared her impossible to miss with had discovered something far more valuable than perfect accuracy. They had discovered the power of human intuition, determination, and the ancient wisdom that comes from understanding that everything in the universe is connected. And in that understanding, humanity had found its place among the stars.